Welcome to the Flowering Daydream podcast, where daydreams become reality. I'm your host, Charlene Windus, and today we are going to be talking about intuition, clairsenses, and the psychic senses, which to me are pretty much all the same thing, just different terminology and different layers and such within the development of all of that intuitive processing and functioning. We are now in season 2, and this is episode 2 of season 2. If you have not listened to season 1, I would check it out. There is an episode on there where I talked in detail about clairvoyance in season 1, and this will be a continuation of that episode. I am going to make a conscious effort in this episode to try to slow down my pace and how fast I talk, which I was already doing in the other episodes. So I just talk really fast and I download information really quickly. And it takes a lot to ground and anchor all of that and hold space for that. And when channeling comes in, when I set the space for these episodes, it's like this really strong river starts to flow when I set the space for it. And so sometimes I just get caught up in that energy. It's easy to just ride that wave and slow down. I also have been editing out all of my breaths so you don't have to hear me breathing. I don't know. There's a breath. I'll leave that one in. I don't know. I just have listened to a lot of podcasts and the breaths, they just like throw me off. I don't know. I don't want to hear you breathing. Breath is like the most important part of life. So I am not going to edit out every single breath in the podcast. And I'm going to work on slowing down just a little bit to see what it's like and go from there. So I hope you enjoy this episode on intuition, clairsenses, and the psychic senses. I'm just really grateful that I'm able to do this in my closet, in my room, and I'm glad I listened to my divine download to bring this forward out there as a resource. And I just want you to know how grateful I am that you're listening. All right. Well, I can talk about intuition for hours and hours and hours and hours. I find it just such a fascinating part of the human existence and our experience and spiritual experience. And it never ends. There's so much to it that we could talk about for forever. It's infinite and it's an infinite space. And I do enjoy being in those expansive and infinite spaces. So, whether you realize it or not, when you are listening to a podcast or watching a movie or watching a webinar or you're reading a book, all of those different avenues are inputting energy downloads into your system. And so it's really important to be aware, stepping into all of those different spaces, of how you're going to center your energy and what you're going to receive and what your boundaries are and what you'll be sort of shielding from. That's part of the boundaries. And so I just like to bring that up as we head into these energetic conversations because they're going to be more charged than an average conversation when you're talking about these different aspects of the energy body. And so just keep that in mind as we're moving forward here in the conversation. So, intuition is a birthright to everyone. We all have it. We all have this inner sense, and we are all capable of developing our intuition. Some are born a little ahead of the game due to familial, ancestral, past life. If you have a line of people who have continuously developed this aspect of themselves and you're a descendant from that line, you may come in out the gate with, at birth with heightened abilities. It also may be equally as strong for someone who develops it later in life and it accesses and turns on, and some kind of a key energetically unlocks this accessible information and wisdom and internal power. And it may be just part of your soul contract or divine timing when this turns on. But after 10 years or so of, teaching classes and working with clients in the energy field, it's my experience that anyone can develop their intuition and anyone can be empowered by this. To what degree you do that and where your comfort level is going to be up to you. So I've kind of categorized it, I think, from what I've witnessed and experienced into three categories. It starts with accessing your natural intuition, your natural internal power. And from what I've experienced and what I believe, it's been removed from almost everyone. The empowerment, the natural intuitive power has been removed. It gets removed by parents, society, culture, religion. It gets removed when someone disempowers you or second guesses you or questions you. It gets disempowered by ourselves when we doubt ourselves or don't trust our gut instincts or don't listen or celebrate those natural intuitions. And so there's just a number of things that disempower this. And I also believe it has a lot to do with our lack of connection to the invisible realms, to energy, to the psyche, to the unseen. And long, long, long ago, that was not an option. Everyone on this planet to survive had to pay attention to the moon cycles, the sun cycles, the seasons, had to pay attention to their neighbor, had to work as a team, had to rely on each other. Before money, it was like trading, right? And before agriculture, it was hunting and gathering. And so if you really look at history and all the different ways that it's sort of changed and morphed as we have become more, I don't know what you want to call it, technologically sound and corporate and colonized and all the things. But at the same time, we have completely detached, forgotten, and lost our ability to have a natural rapport and relationship with our environment and with each other. And this is where the intuition is lost. And so it's my personal belief that if we work on all of that, if we work on reconnecting, if we work on developing our relationship with our environment and each other, if we work on connecting to our ancestral line and our culture and our familial things that happened, you know, way, way back all the way up till now, and we really study that history, or we access it in our dreams, or we access it through shamanic journey work or meditation, or through real life interviews of our family or internet research. It doesn't really matter the avenue. But if we really begin to make that connection and begin to develop relationships with our external world, our environment, we will enliven our internal world, our intuition. And things have moved so far away from signs and symbols and synchronicities and the environmental magic and mystery that happens every day and in every way, and we've completely shut it out. Well, most of us have, not everyone, but most of us have really shut that out. And now we're at this point where it's like everything has to be proven or factual or backed up or secure. There's all these false senses of security around us. There's all these made up ideas of how we should behave and what a life should look like and who should do what and why. And I don't know, it's really kind of muddy, and it's just a complete and absolute disconnect. We care more about materials and accumulation and status and appearance. And I'm a part of all of those things too. I'm human and I like certain things as well. But I think we can be both to a certain degree. And we really, if we really did focus on developing all of those inner relationships and our outer relationships to all of those different aspects of life and really connect deeply again, there could be some profound healing for the earth and for our communities and for each other that naturally happens in that process. And all you can be responsible for is yourself. You can't be responsible for anyone else. You have to honor your own embodiment and your journey and your path first. And when you change within yourself and you connect to your intuition within yourself and you make powerful movement within yourself, it automatically, like a domino effect, affects everybody around you, the earth, the world, consciousness, everything. It's extremely powerful. And so when I hear someone say something like, "Oh, it's not going to make a difference," or "My presence isn't valuable," it's like that's not true at all. In fact, your presence is the most valuable thing on this planet, and how you move in this world is the most valuable thing on this planet, and that can bring profound changes, transformation, and healing. And the more of us that wake up to that, the more powerful that even becomes. Okay, so I'm starting to I'm starting to go totally off topic, but what I want to talk about is intuition. And so I'm going to bring it back around. So this natural intuition is kind of that first like category that we all have access to. And then we have the next category, which would be developed intuition. And that's where you're completely aware that you're an intuitive being and that you are made of energy and a physical body, and that those two things are working together and in tandem, and that they must be married and have constant conversation to feel aligned and to feel balanced. And then you're able to deepen your intuition. That could be the practicing, learning, it's a part of your lifestyle, doing really deep personal work. This is where also some additional safety practices might come in, because when you become aware that there's more than meets the eye, there's a lot of things out there. And those things exist whether you see them, admit them, or work with it or not. And so once you become awakened to that fact, there's a little bit more care within the energetic or spiritual daily practices that you have to tend to your energy. So that's sort of the next category, would be like conscious connection to your intuition and that conscious development and continued development of your intuition. And then the next category would be the spiritually developed intuition, or the energetically intuitively developed intuition. And that would be where you are in, training, regular training, or some type of learning and expansion in the spiritual, energetic, intuitive realm. Maybe mentorship, maybe it's your job, maybe you hold a position in the community where you're holding space energetically for others. This is a category where you've developed and deepened your relationship with all of your spiritual allies or relations, your ancestors, just that deepening of that practice where it becomes not just something that you access when you feel like it, but something that you're working with minute to minute every single day. And so that would be sort of the next category of kind of how I see the intuition development, or the intuition development phases. And so that to me is sort of an explanation, I guess, of intuition. It's just your gut feeling, the inner sense that you have, the inner compass, the inner knowing, and just that natural ability to be able to read the room and read your own energy, or someone else's energy, or a situation, or an experience. It's that voice in your head. That's your intuition. And then we have the Clairsenses, which is the same thing. It's just kind of broken down into deeper explanations. And so for the Clairsenses, you can categorize all these aspects of your intuition to help you develop it. When we kind of break it down like that, it helps us develop things a little bit easier. And so within the Clairsenses, we have clairvoyance, which is that inner vision and that inner sight that we have. That is what I covered in a full episode already in season 1. If you haven't listened to that, you can jump back and listen to the episode we did just on clairvoyance. But clairvoyance is when you might be able to see energy in and around people or things or places. You might be able to see past, present, or future, get sort of those premonitions. You might be able to see ghosts or spirits. You might be able to have dreams that are really vivid. More of an inner visual experience with the clairvoyance. And again, like I said, we all have it. All of this can be developed. But I think a lot of times we get scared, especially of this particular clairsense. And what are we scared of? I mean, I think it's 99.9% of people are scared. They're like scared that they're going to see a ghost or something bad or something scary. when in fact it's a beautiful, magical, mystical experience. And sometimes you do see those things, and the thing is that those things exist anyway. And this is kind of what cracks me up a little bit about the fear that we have around the clairvoyance, is that there are ghosts everywhere. We don't tend to our dead, at least not where I'm from in America. We don't have death rituals. No one talks about death. By the way, I do have a death episode coming up with the amazing nurse Penny, and I just love her. She's a hospice nurse, and she's going to be on the next episode. And so tune in for that, because I'm really excited to ask her some of those questions. But we just don't, no one talks about death. No one prepares for death. No one admits that we're all getting out of here dead. All of us are going to die. And so there are these ghosts everywhere because we don't tend to the process. And this is the aspect I was talking about with the intuition, is that we've completely lost connection to all of our sacred practices and all of that energetic relationship, that necessity to tend to all of these things, that it's friggin' chaos in the spiritual realm, in the middle world here, with the ghosts all running rampant everywhere. So it's like anyone who has done the work and is clairvoyant and does understand how to help those of us that are just humans, that no longer have a body, figure out what to do and where to go. That's really important work, and it's really special work. And it would be a lot less work if we all started tending properly to the dead. But I don't know what we're scared of, when most of the time, these ghosts have died tragically, or died without any notice, or have unfinished business and regrets. And I've talked about this somewhere along the way in the podcast, but if we live a reconciled life every single day, we apologize, we make amends, we understand that we make mistakes, we do our best to amend those, and we say the things we need to say, and we give that last hug and that last kiss, and we be really present, because that's what presence is. It's not being morbid when you're being that present. You're literally connecting to everyone and everything as though it's the last time that you will. You're not taking any moment for granted. The transition is going to be a lot easier. You probably won't end up being a ghost if those things are all being followed. And then, of course, there's the spiritual, energetic, intuitive practices and awarenesses that also help us move along. But if we're missing all of that, which a lot of people are, you might end up wandering around in the middle world. And so when people have like phenomenon happening, or, they see a ghost, or interesting things are happening, it's really just a call for help most of the time. Yes, there are the situations where that's not the case. And yes, there are some things that, the full spectrum exists. It's not good or bad. It's just the full spectrum from light to dark on that vibrational scale of energy exists. There's no night without day. There's no love without hate. There's no joy without pain. And those are just facts of the human experience. And so I think if we just get a lot less scared, also that fear can't really feed, any negative energy. And that's the thing, is that when you're a ghost versus a ghost can affect you energetically in a negative way. So, for example, I'll just use like an easy example. If someone was an alcoholic and they passed away, and you're not an alcoholic, but you're their family member, and they think that they're hanging out with you and staying here and not going wherever they need to go because they don't want to leave you, that might influence you to drink without you even realizing why you're picking up a drink. So, yes, they can influence us, but if we just really actually honored that and understood what was going on, we could actually just talk to them. You don't even have to be clairvoyant to and see them and have a conversation, or to dismiss them, or to have sovereignty over your body, or to have free will over your experiences. Like, you don't have to engage with any energy that you don't want to engage. But we could also learn some coping strategies and some rituals and some practices and some ceremonies that can be very empowering if we are someone who's having those experiences. But not everyone who develops their clairvoyance is going to have those kinds of experiences. Like, I have a friend who the only thing that she sees is when someone's going to die and how. And that's really scary. And she's never really connected to it and doesn't really want to have access to it because that's a difficult thing. But I know another person who can predict, has, I guess, feelings and sensations about um natural disasters and when they're going to occur. Does that really help anything? Probably not. However, it's just an intuitive way to communicate with the internal aspects, energy, and garden of the environment. So it's not always for a benefit that we have these senses developed. It's simply just we're accessing. I kind of think about it as like we're plugging into the matrix, but that's not really it. But I don't know why that movie just came into my head. But it's like we're accessing the mainframe of energy consciousness within our environment and around us when we're doing that. So I guess what I'm trying to say, I'm not trying to freak you out, but there are some things that we need to be afraid of, but not in fear, more as we're in control, we are a sovereign being, we have free will, and we are the ones that set the boundaries for what the experiences are going to be. So you can turn aspects of your intuition up and you can turn aspects of your intuition down. And that's what I call calibrating when I'm teaching about this kind of stuff. I do have a class on Udemy called Introduction to Developing the Clairsenses. And I just kind of walk you through the intro of all of these clairsenses and a couple of exercises that you can do to develop them. But we can calibrate it. We don't have to crank it all the way up. We can turn it down. We can attach, one of the things that I learned to do really early on when I didn't want to have these wild experiences all the time because it felt like I was in like Alice in Wonderland, or that I was on acid all the time trying to have a physical experience. And one of the things that I did was I attached a light switch to the energy line of my clairvoyance or any of my clairsenses and intuition so that I could turn it on and off. If I just wanted to like cook a meal and not be connecting to that, or have a conversation with someone and not being connected to that, I can like turn it off or turn it on now. And that took some practice. So I see a lot of things about like turning all of this on and cranking it up, which is definitely needed for a lot of people. Some of us have already done that, or you're already born kind of that way. And so you actually, in fact, need to do more grounding and embodying and attaching the light switch and shutting things down and shutting things off, especially when you're going to sleep at night so that you can have like a deep restorative rest, or all of these things. And also being respectful, like once we turn these things on and we develop them, it's not appropriate to go around and give a bunch of unsolicited advice just because you figured it out before somebody else did on how to turn all of this on. That can actually be really harmful. And so we also have a responsibility once we turn on all of our intuition and our clair senses to be really responsible with our thoughts and feelings, because now we're moving energy intentionally. And in the beginning, when I really started accessing all of this, I was so excited to share things with people in my environment. And a lot of the time it went really well. And sometimes it didn't because they didn't want to know these things, or they weren't ready to hear these things, or, so just because we have the information or we're accessing this internal network of energy doesn't mean we are meant to share it. And so there comes this sort of discernment that comes along with turning all of this on as well. So then we have clairaudience, which is inner hearing and the ability to hear energy. And this can come in so many ways, and so can the clairvoyance. And I find this really interesting because people have expectations, or they think that things should be going a certain way, when in fact it can be extremely different for each person, sort of how this operates. So one of the ways that clairaudience can come in is through your own thoughts. And this took a long time for me to discern in the beginning because it was my own voice that was coming into my head. But I knew that I wasn't the one sort of initiating that conversation or thought in my head. And that was how I was able to tell between the clairvoyance and my own natural thoughts. Another way it can come through is, if you've prayed or asked about something, or you're looking for guidance, or even if you didn't do any of those initiatory practices, you can receive information, energetic guidance and information through the radio in the car, or through a song, or through a billboard that you drove by, or something that you read while you were scrolling on your phone. And so it can come through those words and songs and vocabulary as well, and that's part of clairaudience too. And when you start developing this, you really want to celebrate the times when you feel like it's developed, and you also want to ground it and to be aware of how you're accessing it so that you can stay also really grounded in the physical world. Because as you develop all this energetic stuff, you will literally float up to the clouds and you will float out of your body and you'll get lost and lose your keys a lot, and and you won't actually be feeling what's going on in your body. There was one point in all of this learning that I couldn't feel when I was thirsty or hungry anymore, and I was literally never tired. And if you went to a psychiatrist or a therapist, they might call that like a manic episode, but this literally lasted nonstop for a couple of years. And I finally was able to get some help with that. And it wasn't a therapist or a psychiatrist, although I think they're really valuable. It was figuring out that I had turned all of this on so high that I was just like floating in the ethers constantly instead of in the physical realm, in the physical body. And so I had to do a lot of physical work that I felt was maybe kind of boring and I didn't really like it, because it also had sort of forced me to feel my own feelings and go through all of these processes that was hard work. I didn't really want to do that. I just kind of liked feeling this sort of sense of being high in the energy ethers. And so it's kind of like drugs. I would even think that it's similar to that, because it's like you feel so good when you access this energetic realm, the spiritual realm. It feels amazing, but you really do have to learn balance of, you are in a human body even though you're a spiritual energetic being, and they're supposed to be married and balance each other. And so it's sort of like, how do you stay in that middle area? And every time you fall off one side or to the other, you bring yourself back with some tools, or whatever your processes is, your rituals or your practices, to help keep you aligned and balanced. So just notice when you're doing that and just call all of your energy home. Make it very intentional that you are accessing your body, access all of your senses, go for a walk without some shoes on, get your feet on the grass or on the ground, get some fresh air, some exercise, drink some water, come into the physical, really come into the physical when you're working through all of this. And then we have claircognizance, which is that inner knowing. And that inner knowing is, you don't really have a reason. You just know. You just have that feeling, and it's just, what's going on. Maybe you have really a lot of information and you don't know how you got it, or maybe it's just a sense or a feeling, but you just know. That's claircognizance. And then we have clairsentience, which is feeling in the body. So it's a physical feeling when you're reading energy. So when you're next to someone and you feel anxious or excited, you're reading physical energy through your physical body. You could get a stomach ache. You could feel like, I actually know someone who was really tuned up on that, and she would feel pretty sick after certain interactions with, different people, and even have diarrhea or have to throw up afterwards because she felt so ill. And so when we learn what our primary clair sense is, or what our primary intuitive sense is, and we're able to ground it and connect to it and deepen it and anchor it and embody it, then we're able to control, in a sense, the way that the reactions are happening in our body. So it's really about getting to know yourself a lot better. I think so many people are experiencing a lot of these things. And I know I did for a long time. I would experience all of these health ailments that I thought were real, just physical, regular health ailments, when in fact they would come and go, and they would modify and adjust based on what I was doing with my energy in this area. And when I figured that out, it's like, oh my gosh, I constantly thought I was sick with something or I was doing something, but really I was just responding to energy. And once you're able to figure all of that out within yourself, you're able to go, oh, okay, now I know when I'm really actually sick or really having an issue. And of course, I go to my primary care physician and I check in, and I'm doing all those things too. But a lot of the time, I was being affected by energy. And when you're able to build really solid foundation of your own personal empowerment in this area, you're able to manage that a lot easier. And then there's clair empathy, which is emotional feeling. So this is when someone's really sad or really angry, you sense that, and you feel those things as though that they're your own when you're around them, when in fact that's not yours. So one of the best things to do with that is to ask yourself, is this my energy or is this someone else's energy? and really begin to understand where that's coming from so that you can make that separation and begin to make that discernment. And another thing that I think is really good in strengthening all of this is connecting to your higher self. So we all have this soul essence, this part of our aspects of ourselves that knows our birth plan and our soul plan. I just imagine it as this like powerful aspect of myself that's in the spiritual realm, but it's also connected to my physical body. And we get disconnected from it. We get disconnected from it in our childhood and through traumatic experiences and through life. And so we can just ask and invite that higher self to strengthen that inner heart, your inner aspect of your soul, and ask that to really enliven in you and to expand in you and to deepen in you and just make that part of a regular practice for yourself. That helps a lot too. I've found in my own personal work to be really inviting that to take up space with you because that is you. And then we have some things that I like to call like the sub-clairs, but these are a little bit less common. But we have clairsalience, which is the ability to smell energy. So if you've ever heard someone say, "Oh, I was in my grandfather's room who passed away and I could smell his cologne or his cigar or my grandmother's perfume," that's the ability to smell energy. And then there's also clairgustance, which is the ability to taste energy. And I only know one person who has that developed in my own inner circle. And so it's the ability to actually taste energy. And so you're getting these energetic downloads through all your different sensory systems, your intuitive senses. So you have all those physical senses: sight, smell, sound, touch, hearing, whatever. And so you have all the physical senses like sight, sound, touch, and smell. But then you have all these intuitive senses that play off of those physical senses and can go into a much more deepening process of you getting to understand yourself a lot more and therefore understanding your environment a lot more. And then we could also call these your psychic senses. Sometimes these get categorized or lumped into one thing, like clairvoyance, clairaudience, and claircognizance can be lumped into the word that you're psychic. So when you have more than one of these senses, it kind of gets lumped into that category of having psychic senses. And that's where, when you have all of these developed, you can get a lot of future information, you can get past information, and you can tap into that energy mainframe, and you're able to access it in many, many different ways through different, whatever your traditions and spiritual practices are. You can access that in that space in there. The only thing I have thoughts and feelings on when it comes to future information or predictions and things like that, I think they have a time and a place and they can be worked with in a really good and beautiful way. But for the most part, I think living in the presence is what's most important, and being mindful of that embodiment, because that's all that we're really guaranteed and nobody really knows. And that's why it's called the mystery. So even though we can access some of that energy to prepare and plan, which can be beneficial, we can also stop living. We can also live our life by that future prediction or that future energy, and it can be harmful. It can also be wrong. Not all clairsenses and psychics and intuitives are always accurate. There's a lot of things that can determine the accuracy and efficiency of those kinds of faculties that we're enhancing in ourselves. And so when you're holding space for someone else, it's kind of a big job. And sometimes it's not being accurate, right? And so if you're drinking or under the influence of a substance, or you're ill or you're tired, or you don't have a really good spiritual practice that's grounded and developed, and you're doing this for other people, that's where the deficiencies can happen in the inaccurate readings. And so that is just what I've witnessed over a lot of time and experiences and watching all of this sort of unfold in myself and in others. And so, I don't kind of hang on to that. I don't really access it very often. And I try to work more with like anything from the past that really needs healing, that's ancestral and familial and childhood, trauma and things like that. And then working with the present, and then preparing for the future and having a preparedness, but not diving into it because we're not there yet. And there's supposed to be mystery. We're not supposed to know everything. I mean, that's why it's called mystery. And so I think there's aspects that you'll never know until you're out of this body again. So what are some things that you can do to really deepen and develop your intuition? The very first thing is to not doubt yourself. Do not second guess yourself. the first feeling, thought, sense, download, gut feeling, whatever it is that you get is always the right one. It's when we start second guessing it, we ask ourselves if it really happened, our intellect and our ego start to talk us out of it. That first thing is always the right thing. It's always the right intuitive download. So don't go to the second thing or the third thing or the fourth thing or the thing that you thought about after. It's that first thing. Don't ignore the daily intuitive communication that you have. You're getting it 24 hours a day. Don't ignore it. Acknowledge it and celebrate it and have gratitude and appreciation that you're accessing it, however little, small, big, large, whatever it is. Really celebrate that and acknowledge that. Do not let anyone disempower you. I used to share, in the very beginning, 10, 15 years ago, when I was really beginning this process, this journey in energy and spirituality, there were so many times when, and I don't think people are doing this on purpose. I think it's their own projections and fears and where their own awareness levels are at. But there are so many times when people would say something that would oppose my excitement about an intuitive download. And it can be as simple as, I just really have a feeling that we shouldn't go to this restaurant tonight. I don't know why. I just have this feeling. And then the partner or the friend says, well, I'm sure it's fine. We have reservations and we're hungry. Let's go. And you go against your feeling. That's when weird stuff happens, right? And so those downloads are happening for a reason for us to listen to. And it's another thing to live in fear. That's not what I'm talking about, but I'm talking about like that natural intuitive download. Or it can be something, as simple as I started setting intentions every day, and now this bird keeps coming to my window every morning to say hello, and I feel like it's a messenger. And somebody says, no, that bird's been coming there all year. What do you mean? Well, maybe you haven't seen it before. Maybe this is the first time you've connected into it, and maybe there's a reason. And so when people say disempowering comments, they're really actually grabbing onto your energy, and they're pulling your energy down. And so you have to have really good boundaries. You have to believe in yourself, and you have to not allow others to disempower you. It's sort of like, I'm not really concerned or care about what anybody else thinks. It's about what I feel and what I think. That's what I'm going to go with in that intuition. And no one is going to be able to break that down. And so in the beginning, it happened a lot until I was able to learn how to establish those boundaries. And so I know it can be done, and it takes work and it takes practice and it takes time. Over time, you'll get it. And then I think something that's really important is to pay attention to symbolism and synchronicity and signs. The universe is always talking to us. Our ancestors are always talking to us. This energy is always communicating. And when we pay attention to that environment, we're able to sort of decipher a little bit more about life and ourselves and our experiences here. And so every little thing has symbolism, the placement of the clouds when you look, the phase of the moon when you happen to notice, the bunny, the little rabbit that hops by, the way the bird flies above you, the things that you notice in nature when you're tuning in and you actually notice, those are communications to you. Whether it's a light communication or a deep, meaningful communication, there's always communication happening. And again, I like to celebrate that, and my heart smiles on the inside when it's happening. And it's always, I just feel like it just becomes more and more profound and more magical and more beautiful as you really tap into that and pay attention. I swear the only time I ever look at a clock, and this happens multiple times a week, I never look at a clock. Every time I look at a clock, it's 111 or 1111. And it's just kind of interesting, right? So when you look, if you study numerology or you look up numbers or you find symbolism in that, there's all this meaning out there that everyone else has decided that means. But for me, every time I see that 111 or 1111, for me, that's confirmation that my spiritual team is with me, is listening, is cheering me on, is affirming or confirming. And that's the symbol that has developed for me. And so if you keep a symbolism journal, it's going to be different for every person. This is why it's not a teachable thing to say, okay, here's what all the symbolisms mean, except for maybe with animals. Sometimes those are pretty common things. But for the most part, your individual communication with your God or guides or allies or whatever the thing is, ancestors, is going to be unique and different to you. And so, like, for example, I use this example in all my classes. Maybe I've already talked about it on here. When I first started out, I was doing an energy reading. I had my hands over a client and I saw a banana. And I thought to myself, I have no idea what a banana means or how that's even relevant. And then she came back later for a facial and she filled out a medical intake and it said that she had a potassium deficiency. That's not my place or my lane to say anything or to do anything about it. But what I found interesting was like, oh, okay, banana means potassium deficiency. And that might not mean that for someone else that sees a banana. It could have a completely different meaning. And so one time I saw a bridge, when I was working with a client, we were talking about something specific. So then I knew the bridge was symbolism for this specific thing. And so as you develop these inner senses, if you want to, and you're a journaling kind of a person, you can write these things down and you can create a symbolism journal of your own intuition. And it's a beautiful language and communication that you can develop. Another thing I really like doing is like a memory visual game with yourself, like a hide and seek. So you could have someone go through and hide, your keys and personal belongings throughout the house, and then you can go and intuitively find them. So, you close your eyes and you sense inward. So instead of using your regular physical senses, you attempt to access some of your intuitive senses and see if you can kind of sense where these things are in the house. And they have to be your own items because those have an imprinting of your energy on it. So it's sort of like the calling card to help you find it. You're not always going to find everything, but it's just fun and it's a way to develop your energy. You can also put a few things out on a tray, stare at it, take a really good look at it, then close your eyes and try to remember and imagine where everything was and what the color was. That helps you sort of develop your inner vision. So each of these exercises can develop different aspects of yourself internally. And then when you're working with really wanting to develop this further, there's a lot of free resources. There's a million TED Talks. There's so many free courses through reading energy and tapping into your intuition through like the Shift Network. Some of my favorite people are on there. And even though their main courses might cost a lot, they generally offer a lot of free summits or they offer 4 free intro videos before purchasing their course. And sometimes those have a lot of information just in those. There's Hay House has a lot of resources. I think the other one I was thinking of is it Sacred Science? There's several. Mind Valley Academy. I love all of their stuff. So there's a lot of resources. There's social media. So many people now are on social media. Just delete everything off of your social media that is not nourishing. And you can follow psychologists, psychiatrists, spiritual people that you resonate with, mentors, therapists, anything that is in this realm of work. And then when you scroll your feed, you can get a little therapy, you can get a little training, you can learn something new. And so it becomes like a refill rather than a drain when you get on your social media. You can join groups that are meetings. Sometimes there's free meetings and free groups. Sometimes they're paid. You can go to therapy, a spiritual therapist who is trained in shamanic or the healing arts or some type of healing arts and also is a therapist. There are sliding scales for that if you don't have access to therapy. There are free groups. There just is a lot of resources out there to be able to develop spiritually and personally. And then, of course, if you can, a mentor or mentorship in this area or joining, classes or programs that are 1 year long so that you're able to meet with a group of people that are also working on all of this so that you have some others that you can talk about this with. I remember that being like a zero option thing where I could talk about it, but no one was really understanding what I was saying because they weren't developing these aspects of themselves. And so finally, after I had found a class and a group, it was like, okay, I can talk openly that, I might see a ghost and I have these experiences and I can hear this and that and these things are happening and I feel ungrounded and now I'm grounded and now I'm not and now I'm it's kind of a whirlwind. I mean, this is like a path. This is like walking a path of constant awareness and responsibility and engagement with yourself and with your environment. And It's actually, I think, a lot of work, and I'm always learning and I'm always changing and I'm always growing and expanding. And sometimes I'm falling down and I'm a mess and a disaster, and other times I'm advancing at, Mach speed. And so it's a journey, and everyone's journey is going to be different when you wake up and you tap into all this. And it can be at whatever level or degree or however you want it to be. It doesn't have to be your life's purpose or your professional work, but it can be a really empowering and very healing practice to be really engaged with your intuition. You can also pull a daily oracle card or a daily tarot card to get that communication energetically flowing through you with safe practices, of course. And you can find my class on the introduction to oracle cards and also a professional oracle card reader course on Udemy where I have all of my online courses. So thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation on intuition, the clairsenses and psychic senses, and may you feel connected and aligned, and may unconditional love flow to you today and every day. Thank you for listening to the Flowering Daydream podcast, where daydreams become reality. I'm your host, Charlene Windus. You can find me at charlenewindus.com, where you will find all of my offerings, including my online courses to Udemy and my free meditations on Insight Timer, as well as other podcast episodes and offerings.